In a powerful and symbolic act of defiance, diplomats from numerous countries walked out of the United Nations General Assembly on September 27, 2024, as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu took the stage to deliver his address. This unprecedented protest was a direct response to Israel's ongoing military actions in Gaza and its recent bombings in Lebanon. As Netanyahu began speaking, the sight of diplomats hastily exiting the hall made headlines around the world, highlighting the growing discontent with Israel's aggressive tactics and the humanitarian crisis unfolding in the region. The war in Gaza, now nearing its one-year mark, has left the territory in ruins, with much of it described as an uninhabitable hellscape. Over 42,000 civilians have been killed, including thousands of women and children. The destruction is widespread, with entire neighborhoods reduced to rubble, hospitals and schools obliterated, and critical infrastructure decimated. Nearly every resident of Gaza has been displaced at least once, and the northern part of the enclave teeters on the brink of famine. The human cost of this war has prompted global outrage, and the walkout at the UN Assembly was a stark reflection of the international community's frustration. Netanyahu, visibly frustrated by the protest, delivered a speech that many found to be unapologetic and provocative. He defended Israel's actions in Gaza, claiming that his country had every right to defend itself against what he called terrorist threats. Referring to the October 7 Hamas-led attacks that targeted southern Israel, Netanyahu stated, "Israel has every right to remove this threat and return our citizens to their homes safely. And that's exactly what we're doing." His speech, however, did little to acknowledge the mounting civilian death toll in Gaza, nor did it offer any prospect for peace. Adding to the tension, Netanyahu also addressed the escalating situation in Lebanon, where Israeli airstrikes have killed more than 700 people in the past week alone. Lebanon has seen waves of destruction, with densely populated areas, including Beirut's southern suburbs, suffering heavy bombardment. The Israeli military claims its strikes are targeting Hezbollah strongholds, but residential buildings have been flattened, leading to significant civilian casualties. Netanyahu doubled down on Israel's stance, warning that his forces would continue to strike Lebanon with all our might as long as Hezbollah remained a threat. "We're at war with Hezbollah," he declared. "As long as Hezbollah chooses the path of war, Israel has no choice." Netanyahu's speech was also rife with warnings directed at Iran, as he took aim at Tehran for its alleged involvement in the region's conflicts. Tensions between Israel and Iran have been on the rise since Israel carried out strikes on Iranian interests in Syria and assassinated Hamas's political chief, Ismail Haniyeh, in Tehran. Netanyahu, in a defiant tone, warned Iran of potential retaliation, stating, "I have a message for the tyrants of Tehran: if you strike us, we will strike you." There is no place in Iran that the long arm of Israel cannot reach. His rhetoric suggested that the Middle East could be on the verge of further escalation, sparking fears of a broader regional conflict. As Netanyahu's address concluded, the situation on the ground worsened. Mere hours after he spoke at the UN, Israeli fighter jets launched another round of intense airstrikes on Beirut, targeting areas in the southern suburbs known as Dahia. The attacks flattened several residential buildings, and although the Israeli military claimed to be targeting Hezbollah headquarters, the damage extended to civilian areas. Videos circulated online showed extensive destruction, with families trapped under the rubble. Israeli media reported that the intended target of the strikes was Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, but these claims were refuted by Lebanese sources who stated Nasrallah was in a secure location. The international community has been grappling with how to respond to Israel's ongoing military actions. Throughout the week, world leaders have repeatedly called for a ceasefire, urging both Israel and the armed groups in Gaza and Lebanon to de-escalate the conflict. U.S. President Joe Biden, along with several European leaders, reiterated the need for an immediate halt to the violence. However, Netanyahu's speech poured cold water on these efforts, making it clear that Israel would not stop its military campaign anytime soon. His insistence that Israel would continue to strike with all our might has left many wondering if the war will expand even further. The walkout by diplomats was not the only act of resistance against Israel at the UN. Just a day before Netanyahu's address, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas delivered a scathing speech, challenging Israel's narrative of the conflict and holding the global community accountable for the violence in Gaza. Abbas asked pointedly, who is responsible for the killing of 15,000 Palestinian children, if not Israel? His impassioned plea to stop this crime and stop the genocide resonated with many in the audience, and his condemnation of the continued international support for Israel, particularly in the form of weapons sales, added to the growing chorus of voices calling for an end to the bloodshed. The boycott of Netanyahu's speech is a clear indication that the tide of international opinion is shifting. As Israel continues its military operations with little regard for the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and Lebanon, more and more countries are distancing themselves from the Israeli government's policies. The walkout at the UN General Assembly is a powerful symbol of the world's frustration, and it raises the question of how long Israel can continue its military actions without facing stronger consequences from the global community. With the situation in Gaza growing more dire by the day and tensions with Lebanon and Iran escalating, the world is watching closely. Whether this protest will mark a turning point in international diplomacy or merely signal the beginning of a more protracted conflict remains to be seen. But one thing is clear, the pressure on Israel to halt its military campaign is mounting, and the voices calling for peace are growing louder.